It started with a sound. Not a loud crash or anything dramatic, but a faint, rhythmic scratching, like fingernails lightly scraping against wood. At first I thought it was the wind rattling the old house's bones. But the sound came at odd times, in the dead of night, when the air was still, or when I was utterly alone, sitting in my room, trying to focus on something else. I live alone, a small, creaky place on the outskirts of town. Rent was cheap, and the landlord didn't ask too many questions. It's just me and the loneliness of wide-open nights. Most evenings I'd put on a podcast or some background noise to drown out the oppressive silence. But lately, even the static hum of entertainment couldn't cover that noise. The first night I noticed it clearly, I just turned off the lights. The room was pitch black, save for a sliver of moonlight filtering through the blinds. As I lay there, teetering on the edge of sleep, the sound returned. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was deliberate and measured, too steady to be the house settling. I held my breath, straining my ears. Was it coming from the floorboards? My breath caught as I realized it was coming from directly beneath me. From under the bed. A laugh escaped me, a nervous bark in the dark. "You're being ridiculous," I muttered, willing my brain to accept the rational explanation. Mice. It had to be mice. This place was old. I'd seen the occasional cockroach scuttle across the bathroom floor. But even as I lay there, trying to believe my own excuse, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, its screen glaringly bright in the dark room. I turned on the flashlight and aimed it at the floor, heart pounding like a drum. Slowly, I leaned over the edge of the mattress. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the wooden planks beneath the bed frame. I could see dust bunnies, the outline of an old shoebox I'd forgotten about, but nothing else. And then the scratching stopped. My heart slowed. I'd scared whatever it was, I decided. Relieved, I let out a shaky breath, turned off the flashlight, and rolled back onto my pillow. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, waiting for the sound to return. It didn't. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and I fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I laughed at myself over a bowl of cereal. It had been mice. Or maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, nerves playing tricks on me after too many late nights and too much caffeine. But the noise came back the next night. And the next. It was always just as I was about to drift off, and always stopped the moment I tried to investigate. After 3 sleepless nights, I was a wreck. My imagination was spiraling out of control. I started seeing shadows move in the corners of my vision, hearing faint whispers that dissolved into silence when I turned my head. I felt watched, even when I was alone in the house. One evening, I decided enough was enough. Armed with a flashlight in one hand and a broom in the other, I crouched by the bed. Whatever it was, I'd scare it off for good. I flicked on the light and jabbed the broom under the bed, swiping blindly at the shadows. "Come on out, you little bastard," I muttered, sweeping the broom back and forth. Dust billowed up, making me cough. I jabbed deeper, hitting the back wall with a loud thud. But there was nothing there. Satisfied, I set the broom aside and turned to crawl out from under the bed. That's when I saw it. 2 eyes, wide and unblinking, reflecting the light like twin mirrors. They stared at me from the shadows, just beyond the reach of the flashlight beam. I froze. My brain scrambled to make sense of what I was seeing. It had to be an animal, a raccoon or a stray cat that had somehow gotten inside. But the eyes were too large, too human. And then they blinked. A wave of primal terror surged through me. I scrambled backward, nearly knocking over the lamp on my nightstand. The flashlight rolled out of my hand, casting wild arcs of light across the room as I backed away. By the time I regained my senses and aimed the light under the bed again, the eyes were gone. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even stay in the room. I grabbed a blanket and camped out on the living room couch, every creak of the house setting my nerves on edge. The next day, I called an exterminator. I didn't mention the eyes, just told him I'd been hearing scratching under the bed. He came by in the afternoon, poking around with traps and a flashlight. After an hour, he shrugged and told me he couldn't find any signs of pests. "If it's mice, they're gone now," he said with a lopsided grin. "Probably scared them off with all that noise last night." I nodded and thanked him, but I didn't feel reassured. I couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. The following nights were worse. The scratching returned, louder now, more insistent. And it wasn't just at night anymore. I'd hear it while I was watching TV or brushing my teeth or sitting at my desk. Always that same deliberate, rhythmic sound. Sometimes I'd swear I heard breathing too, shallow and raspy, like someone struggling to hold it in. One night, after a particularly loud bout of scratching, I lost it. "What do you want?" I shouted, flipping on the bedroom light. "What the hell do you want from me?" The noise stopped. The silence was worse. I stood there, trembling, waiting for something, anything to happen. When nothing did, I grabbed my phone and started recording. If I couldn't prove this to anyone else, I needed to prove it to myself. I set the phone on the floor, angled it under the bed, and hit record. For a long time, nothing happened. Just static silence and the faint hum of the house's electrical system. But then, just as I was about to give up, the scratching began again. It was louder through the phone's speakers, more guttural. It sounded like nails dragging through flesh raw and wet. I pulled the phone back and stopped the recording, heart pounding. My hand shook as I opened the video, scrolling to the part where the noise had started. The camera's night mode had caught something as shape, low and hunched, crawling just out of frame. And then, for a brief moment, two glinting eyes stared directly into the lens. I dropped the phone, my stomach twisting. My chest tightened, and I struggled to breathe. This wasn't in my head. It wasn't mice. It was real. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after that. I didn't dare go into the bedroom. Instead, I stayed in the living room with every light in the house turned on. But even then, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. On the fourth night, I woke up to find myself back in my bed. I didn't remember going there. The lights were off. The room was silent. Except for the scratching, which was now impossibly loud, like claws raking against my skull. And then, a voice whispered from beneath the bed, soft and low. "I'm hungry." I've been sitting here ever since, too terrified to move. The scratching hasn't stopped. It's been hours. Maybe days. My phone battery died a while ago. I don't know what time it is anymore. The voice keeps whispering, asking for something I can't give. And I can feel it now, the weight of it, shifting beneath me. Waiting. The scratching has stopped, but the breathing hasn't.